Evelyn Jerome Alexander with Magellan College Counseling, and I'm going to go through some basics about college financial aid with you right now. So just really quick, who am I? I'm Evelyn. I founded Magellan about 10 years ago, and I've been helping students and their parents through the process ever since. I'm a certified educational planner, and I teach in UC Berkeley's college counseling certificate program. So today I will go through, like I said, some basic information about college financial aid, just so you have an understanding of where to start and where in the process you should really start thinking about financial aid. It's probably earlier than you think. So here's one of the biggest things that you should know. There's two kinds of financial aid. There's need-based aid and there's merit-based aid. So every college in the country gives need-based aid, and I promise I'll talk about, the gateway and how to get there and what's considered. Every college gives need-based aid. Every college does not give merit-based aid, and this is honestly one of the points where sometimes we see some frustration, because you have a superstar kid who's got great grades and great test scores, and they get into amazing colleges, but they get no scholarship money. And it's because some of those schools just don't give scholarships, don't give merit aid. So it's really important to know who gives money and who doesn't. And I'm going to go through with you today how to figure that out. So the terms are really important to know. So when you hear things, it's good to know what the person saying them means. So when I say cost of attendance, I'm not just talking about tuition, I'm talking about the whole cost. Tuition, room and board, travel, books, any kind of incidental expenses that your child might incur. So cost of attendance, we call that the big number. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. And I promise I'll talk more about this in just a moment. One of the most important terms you need to know when it comes to college financial aid is the EFC. It's your expected family contribution. And I will go through how this works as well. It's really important for you to know that this is a government formula. No one is ever going to ask you how much you think you can afford to send your child to college. It's a number that a government formula will generate for you. Okay, the student aid report is an email that you will receive from the Department of Education after you submit the FAFSA. The SAR is going to tell you what your EFC is. Okay, when we say grants and scholarships, sometimes people throw these words around as if they're interchangeable. They are not. Grants are based on need. Grants are money that you don't have to pay back. It's money that is being granted to you. Scholarships are based on merit. Now, scholarships are also money that you don't have to pay back, but again, they're based on different things. So when we're talking grants, we're talking need-based. When we're talking scholarships, we're talking merit-based. The word self-help is used to describe money that you can either borrow or earn, that you're borrowing or earning to help yourself through college, right? So loans are considered self-help. You can choose to take out loans. You can also refuse loans. But if you refuse loans, then you have to pay that money yourself. You have to fill in the money yourself. And you can also do the same with work study. Many colleges will offer you loans. They will offer you work study. You can say, no, I don't want my child to work. But if you say that and you say no to the money that they're offering you for that, then you're going to have to find another way to pay that money. Okay, so that's some basic terms. This formula is super important. This is the whole formula that you need to know. Everything surrounds this. The cost of attendance, remember, that's the big number. Cost of attendance minus your EFC, your expected contribution, is your need. Now keep in mind, different colleges are going to have different costs. So your need will be different at each school. Some colleges, many colleges, use what we call the federal methodology to determine your EFC. And the federal methodology is based on the FAFSA. Some colleges use additional information, and that information is something that you'll submit through another document called the CSS profile. It's College Scholarship Service, CSS profile. that is run by the College Board. Colleges that use the CSS profile, they're looking for additional information to see how much need you have. We call this the institutional methodology because they're using a different calculation to figure out how much you can afford for college. Again, it's really important for you to understand that need is not a fixed cost. Your need will be different depending on which college you choose to attend, okay? So again, I want to drill this formula home because the formula is really important. Cost of attendance minus your EFC is your financial need. And again, different at each school. Okay, so the FAFSA is truly the opening step to dealing with need-based financial aid, need-based aid. Again, it's the free application for federal student aid. This is really important. It's not FAFSA.com, it's FAFSA.ed.gov, and ed is the Department of Education. This is the first step that you will take to start applying for need-based aid for your child. Now you will start applying. The FAFSA will open for your class on October 1 when your student is a senior. So let's say like right now I'm making this recording in 2020. Hopefully things won't change and we'll just keep watching this recording. But I'm making this recording in 2020. So the students that are seniors right now in the fall of 2020 will graduate in 2021 and they will start college in the fall of 2021. So the data that the FAFSA requires is from 2 years prior to when your student started college. So if your student starts college in 2021, we're using 2019 income data. So we call that prior year. The reason they do that is that they used to use the year prior, but we got to the point where when the FAFSA would open, you hadn't already submitted your tax returns for the previous year. So everyone was throwing in estimates and then amending it later, which makes the college's job of providing you with a financial aid package very difficult. So we went to prior year. I will say this. If your financial situation has changed over the course of that 2-year lag between the data you're reporting and when your student starts college, you can absolutely call a college financial aid office and have a conversation with them about how your financial situation has changed. However, you must submit to the FAFSA the data from the year it requests. There's no variation on that. Okay, so you're always going to submit the prior year, and then if you need to give them some updated information, you can do that after they give you the award. The reason it's important to understand this is, think about it this way. When your child applies to college in the fall of their senior year, they're going to apply to a whole bunch of colleges, 10, maybe 15, right? You will submit your FAFSA to all 15 of those colleges. So you're sending your financial data to a whole bunch of colleges, but they're not gonna all admit your son or daughter, right? So there's no point in picking up the phone and calling all 15 of them because the financial aid office doesn't even see your information until the admission office admits your son or daughter, right? So some of those schools you're never going to need to negotiate with because your son or daughter won't even be admitted. Okay, so that's something for down the road after your student is admitted. Okay, so FAFSA.ed.gov, and both the parent and the student have to enter information into the FAFSA. The FAFSA is actually the student's document, right? It's the student asking for need-based aid, but the supporting information comes from you as a parent. Okay, so what do we need to fill out a FAFSA? Your first step is to get an FSA ID. So it's kind of like a PIN that you use to log into the FAFSA, and it needs to validate you, and it does need a social security number. You will need your tax returns. You should be able to connect your FAFSA with your tax returns. It's called the IRS data retrieval tool. There are a few instances where the data retrieval tool will not work. If you have had your identity stolen and you've had to go through the IRS and recreate your tax history, the data retrieval tool will not work. You should have bank statements. You should have records of your investments. For the FAFSA, your IRA protected, your retirement protected accounts will not be counted, but the CSS profile, which I'll talk about in a moment, does ask for much greater depth of your financial history. So they will ask for basically all of your investments. If you have any untaxed income, you'll need to know that as well. When I post this video, I will post the PDF of this of the presentation that you're seeing, and all of these links are hot linked, so you'll be able to download the presentation and go straight through to the links. We do actually recommend that you actually print out a paper FAFSA and just do a practice run. The whole FAFSA is about 7 pages, and when you print it out with all of the instructions, it's like 10 pages. So it's nice to just go through and see what it's going to ask you in advance. So I'll make sure that we have a link to that as well. Just to prepare. So what does the FAFSA consider? It's basically looking at a couple different things. It's looking at the parent's income and assets, again, from a particular year. It's looking at your family size. It's looking at how many students you are supporting through college. It is considering the age of the older parent and how close you are to retirement. Then it will also look at the student's income and assets. It'll look at the parent's savings, and it will look at the value of your home, or if you own a business, it will look at the value of your business. Again, the CSS profile, about 250 colleges require deeper information about your financial history, and they do use a different calculation, so your EFC could be a couple different numbers. And in fact, the best way to start this is to do a practice run of your EFC. And this link right here, the College Board has an EFC calculator on their website. When you click that link, it will actually ask you, do you want the federal methodology or the institutional methodology? And then right under that, one of the options says both. So when I send this to my clients, I always say, please have it give you both your institutional and your federal methodology, so you will end up with 2 different numbers. And sometimes they're close, and honestly, sometimes they're very, very far apart. Most of the time, your institutional methodology EFC will be higher, although I have strangely seen, I've seen the opposite of that. If your institutional methodology EFC comes up high, like very high, that's when you might be in the position. What that means is that's what they assume that you'll be prepared to pay per year for college. So this is when we get into the realm of looking for colleges that give merit money. Okay, so I've got a link here to the list of colleges that require the CSS profile. Again, it's mostly private, although there are some public universities that do require the profile. There's only about 250 of them, and it also opens on October 1st. So let's see, deadlines are really important. Like I said, FAFSA CSS profile open on October 1st. They're not due on October 1st. They open on October 1st. If your student is applying early decision or early action and you are looking for a financial aid award, a need-based award, they almost always want you to submit the FAFSA by the same deadline as the actual college application. So if you're applying to a November 1 deadline school, you should plan on having the FAFSA and possibly the CSS profile submitted by November 1. You need to check on each college's website. They will give you deadlines. Just make sure you're hitting those deadlines. Okay, again, we know the formula, right? COA minus EFC equals need. But again, the number, the cost of attendance at each college is different. So your need and your eligibility for financial aid will be different at each school. So the big important question is, how do colleges fill that need? And will they fill all of it? This is a really important question, because your EFC is not the cap of what you could be paying for college. It could be the floor. It's really important to know this. So let's go through really quickly. The first way that a college could fill need is through grants. These grants on this page are basically for people with very low income who are at or conceivably below the poverty line. When we're talking about Pell Grants, when we're talking about state grants, these are for people with extreme need. Colleges also are fairly generous. Many colleges are fairly generous with people who have extreme need. So we'll leave it at that. Scholarships, again, many of these are based on many different things, grades and test scores, sometimes talent, sometimes athletics. They're usually highly, highly competitive. Again, right now I'm talking about scholarships given from the colleges. There are also, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, outside scholarships, but usually they're very small amounts, they're one-time grants, and they're not renewable. So to me, in my book, what that means is you really should be going towards colleges that give scholarships instead of looking outside. The one thing I would say about outside scholarships and maybe employer scholarships, it's very likely that after your student has gone through this very long process of preparing their college applications, writing lots of essays, they should be able to use some of those essays for outside scholarships. So I usually push the scholarships for later, and let's focus on the college applications first and get through all of that material that you need to get through, and all of those essays that you need to get through, knowing that we're going to be able to use those down the road for scholarships. Okay, now there's also work study, as I mentioned. Work study is, again, based on need. It means the college will have an on-campus job available for your student. It's usually anywhere from 5 to 15 hours per week. And usually the money from your paycheck just goes directly to the bursar's office to pay your tuition. Like I said, you can say, if you are offered a work study grant, if there's a portion of your financial aid that is offered to you that's work study, you can say, no, I don't want my child to work their freshman year. But if it's a $2,500 amount, you will have to make up that $2,500, right? They're not just taking it off the tuition. Okay, and loans, to be honest with you, loans are usually the first way that a college is going to fill your need. So there is a cap on the amount of money that is allowed to be granted through federal student loans. That's what we're talking about here, federal student loans. We used to call them Stafford loans. They will either come subsidized or unsubsidized. Subsidized means that you will not be paying interest, or your student will not be paying interest until 6 months after they receive their degree. Unsubsidized means that the loans will accrue interest from the minute it is dispersed. The cap on subsidized and unsubsidized loans for the freshman year is $5,500. They can't loan you more than that. And again, if you decide you don't want to take those loans, you will have to fill in that $5,500. And then plus loans is the parent loan for undergraduate students. This is not granted by the federal government. It's granted separately. The interest rate is usually significantly higher than the interest rate for student loans, which is usually in the 3% range. The interest rate for parent plus loans is usually in the 6 to 7% range. So they're definitely not as desirable, but the amount is not limited. So they could be offering you a big, huge chunk of a parent plus loan. This is not really a good thing. And this is when you might want to find other alternatives for financing your child's education. Okay, so this is a real problem. What happens if your need is really high? Your need is like, let's say $30,000, and I'll show you some examples in a minute, but let's say there's a gap of $30,000 between the cost of attendance and your EFC. So your need comes up $30,000. Well, the first $5,500 is your unsubsidized and subsidized loans. The next $2,500 could be your work study, but that's only $8,000. So we still have a $22,000 gap. Some schools will fill that gap with grants. Some won't. Some schools will offer you a Parent Plus loan. That's not money they're giving to you. That's a loan, right? So this is where you have to be really aware of how much of the need the college fills. If they fill 100% of need, that's great. That means they're very generous. If they don't fill 100% of need, then you are going to be paying more than your EFC, right? So I want you to be prepared for that. And again, that's where people always say to me, where do we find outside scholarships? And I say that's a trick question. And here's the real numbers. And I think this chart is really illuminating. The big chunk right here, these are federal loans. These are federal Pell Grants. Again, this is for people who have extreme need. Same here with the federal non-Pell. This is for need. State grants, very, very high need. This is for tax credits right here. But the two wedges of this pie that I want you to look the most closely at are right here. This red wedge, this is private scholarships. This is those outside scholarships that you keep hearing about that sometimes have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of students applying for these one-time scholarships. right? That one student in the whole country will win. This blue chunk right here, 23% of the money that helps kids pay for college comes from the colleges themselves. There's 4 times more money coming from the colleges than coming from those outside scholarships. So I want you to go where the money is. Let's look at colleges that give merit aid. This is what we call merit aid, okay? So if you have low or no need, if your EFC is very high and the likelihood of there being a delta between the college's cost of attendance and your EFC is low, if you are not going to qualify for need-based aid, what do? You need to go to colleges that have a track record of giving merit money. And this is where we tell students we want you to love your safeties, because the safe schools are the ones who will probably be the most likely to give you money. Why? Because they're trying to move up the charts, and you, with your amazing grades and test scores, are going to help them do that. They are trying to lure you away from a different school. And I hesitate at using these words here. You may consider a school that has a higher ranking to be better, but I would challenge you to really think about whether that school is better or whether that bumper sticker just might feel better on your bumper. And you have to really make a decision. Would you rather have the bumper sticker that you're going to pay a lot for, or would you rather have your child be rewarded with a scholarship and go to a college and get an amazing four-year education for less money? So the way that I find this information is I go to college data. College data is an amazing source of information, and I'm going to walk you through what college data shows you in just a moment. But here's the bottom line on merit aid. I kind of just explained it to you. Everybody's trying to move up the rankings, right? And so who do they give money to? They give money to the kids at the very top of the pool. But the bottom line, and what will save you a lot of heartache and frustration, is don't expect merit money from colleges that don't generally give it. This is where we tell students the list is really important, because if you have a list full of colleges that don't give merit money, you should not be holding out hope that you will get a scholarship somewhere. Because you've basically answered the question with your list. There is money in the list. The magic is in the list. That's where that's where you pick your acceptances. That's where you decide if you are interested in getting scholarship money. And to parents, I say, if there are colleges on your list, and I'll go through some examples here, if there are colleges on your list, on your students list, that don't give merit money, and you truly do not want, it would be very uncomfortable for you to pay that full price, you should very strongly consider having your child remove that college from their list. I know that's a very hard conversation to have, but the truth is this: I would rather have you have your child take Duke off their list at the beginning than have your child get into Duke and you have to look them in the eye and say, sweetie, congratulations, you did everything we told you to do. This is fabulous, but this one is going to cost $75,000 a year, and this one gave you a $30,000 scholarship, and this is a better situation for our family. Because when you think about it, your teenager doesn't really understand the value of $30,000 or $40,000 per year for 4 years. That's $120,000, $150,000, and that's $120,000, $150,000 right now. When you are, about 50, what would that money look like 20 years from now when you retire? That's something that you as an adult have the capacity to think about, but your teenager doesn't really have the capacity to think about yet or understand yet. So this is where, as much as we say it's very important that your student take responsibility for driving this process, you definitely need to step in as a supervisor when it comes to the paying for college part. So I just want to go through a couple quick examples for you. And caveat, I went to Johns Hopkins. My degree is from Johns Hopkins. My 4-year degree cost just a little bit more than what you would pay for 1 year of Johns Hopkins right now. And so I always claim a lifetime ability to use Hopkins as an example. So if you're applying to UCLA, if you're an in-state resident, if you look at tuition, room, board, fees, everything, the miscellaneous expenses are high because the UCs require you to buy their health insurance plan. This number is $34,000. It's gone up a little bit. It's about $37,000, all in all the UC campuses, tuition, room, board, everything about $37,000. Tulane is closer to 70. Hopkins is closer to 75 at this point. So let's look at what's going to happen if your EFC was about $35,000. Let's go back. If your EFC was about $35,000, you basically can pay full price for UCLA or for the UCs. So you're not going to get anything from them. At Tulane, you will have a gap of $35,000 between their cost and your expected family contribution. So the question is, how is Tulane going to fill that gap? Well, it's important to see that they fill 98% of need, right? And this is all from college data, by the way. Now, I have an account, it's free. All you have to do is sign up, and I promise they're not going to email you 8 billion times. But I have an account because it's important to me that I have access to this information, but you have access to this information too. So free account on collegedata.com. You can see, you have to look each college up individually, and there's a tab called Money Matters. When you click on the Money Matters tab, it will tell you how many kids apply for financial aid, how many they give financial aid to, how many students' need they met fully, and what the average percent of need met was. So that average is very high. It's not exactly 100%, but it's very high. You can see what the average award is. This is need-based award, right? Need-based gift, 98.7% of students with an average award of $32,000 got a need-based gift. However, if you scroll down to the bottom, it talks about merit money. So 36% of their class had no financial need whatsoever. This is the important part. If you have low need, high EFC, low need, 36% of their class got nice chunky $27,000 worth of award. Now, that's not even half tuition. That's less than half tuition. But what it does is it brings the cost of a private university down to basically what you'd be paying for in California for an in-state public university, right? Actually a tiny bit less. So Tulane is very, very generous on both the need-based side and the merit-based side. That's not always true for every college. So here, by comparison, is Johns Hopkins. And this is interesting too, this is Tulane again, a little more than half of the freshman class applied for financial aid. Here at Hopkins, 2/3 of the freshman class applied for financial aid, for need-based aid. And of those who applied, they found 80% to have need. They fully met the need, they filled the entire gap for every single student who they found to have financial need. And you can see the average award is $41,000. 80% of 65%, so let's see, 682 students, which is about half of their class is about 1,300 students, are paying about $30,000, right? Because the average award is about $40,000, which is over half of the total cost of attendance. But down here, when we get into the merit-based money, this is where the difference is. 17 students out of a class of 1,350, so we're talking 1% of freshmen had no financial need and received merit aid. Now, I happen to know that they have a very nice award called the Beneficial Hodson Scholarship. It is one scholarship that they give to a very small number of students. Their philosophical choice is to give a big scholarship to a very small number of students. Other schools give smaller incremental scholarships to a bigger number of students. So what that does is that drives, for Hopkins, that drives this number down and this number up. You may see numbers that look the opposite for other schools. You may see a much higher percent of their freshman class getting a much smaller amount of money. And that's when you have to say to yourself, is it worth it to me if, assuming I'm not going to get the financial aid, assuming that I'm not going to be one of those 17 students. By the way, over here on the right side, this is the average GPA. This is obviously unweighted, and these are the average test scores. So if you apply to Hopkins and you have a 690 on the reading and a 710 on the math, which is a quite impressive 1,400, are you going to get merit aid? I'm going to say no. There is zero chance that someone who is way down here, this is the middle 50% of students who are admitted, there's 0% chance that if you are at the bottom of their middle 50% that you will end up one of the merit kids. You have to be way up at the top. So when people say to me, do you think I'll get a merit scholarship? I'm going to look at these are exactly the numbers I'm going to look at. I'm going to look at the middle 50% scores, the average GPA, and I'm going to look at the other intangibles, which are playing an ever more increasing role. in college admissions. I'm going to look at activities and depth of activities. And that's how colleges are going to be awarding merit money these days. So I hope that this has been helpful and has illuminated kind of how the financial aid process works. I created this presentation because so frequently people call us in the spring who didn't, work through the whole process with us, and they're very disappointed. They're disappointed in where their student was or wasn't admitted. They're disappointed in the amount of scholarships that were not awarded. And what we say is you really have to do your homework and know what to expect, because that's going to be what reduces your frustration. So I wanted to have our contact information here. We're happy to help. We're happy to answer questions. Our website is magellancounseling.com, and on the contact us page, there's a place where you can enter your information, sign up for our newsletter, ask us any questions. We are truly happy to help and hold your hand through any part of this process. Our job really is to reduce stress, and I hope that by knowing just a little bit more about the financial aid process, that will reduce a little bit of stress for you and for your child. So thanks, and hope this helps. Bye-bye.